Yeah.
So that's just for the live stream, right?
Yeah.
So is he gonna wear two mics? Is he gonna wear two mics?
So he's just gonna wear this mic and then the other one is handheld.
I prefer if we can put the other one on him too, so he because he also has to click through the thing. So do you want me to grab one of the mics from
I will grab it. You can just give this to him because the live stream is already on.
Okay.
So
Excuse? I am. So this is for the live stream so that the sound is clear because it's set up in the back. And Oasis is going to get you a second mic, so you'll have to just put on you.
Okay.
So you can place this there.
So we need to use both of them, technically, right?
Yes, one for the space and one for, just to make sure. But you can pin that on when you're comfortable and seated or whatever works for you because you'll have to hold this for a little bit.
And maybe can go to my pocket.
Perfect, yeah.
Right?
All set. He's going to get you the other one and then we'll get started.
And then your phone. Yeah, Imam Zia wanted to do the event, so I said there are many reasons to come to Alexandria to see you guys.
So is he coming or is he doing the introductions or is he not coming?
Say it again?
Imam Zia coming or?
I don't know. I mean, he may not come. I don't know. I mean, at this.
He's busy with the kids, the young kids.
I imagine he's like, right? Is he an IT person also during the week?
I think so. I think he's
like software IT person.
I think so. Yeah. Well, I think he works for a local federal authority or something. One of the government agencies or something. Yeah. He's really busy always.
Yeah. I imagine he does other events, speaker for, I don't know, faith community.
He must get 10 or 15 invitations a week, right?
Yeah, I imagine.
Time is very challenging,
So we don't need, this is not, this is on.
Live stream.
Okay. Is it on now?
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
But it's not live streaming now, right? It's not.
Yeah, it is. It is live streaming right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but it's just the beginning, so people don't really,
Okay.
get to it. So we have.
So maybe I should turn it off now?
you comfortable? That's comfortable.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Do you want to move it up now, or?
I think maybe, yeah, it's better, huh?
Yeah, it'll just be a comfortable reach for you. Better?
Yeah, then this way I don't need this. Elif tamam.
Are you good if I make an introduction now?
Say it again.
You're all set?
I think I'm fine. Ready? And then can we make sure the Q&A session is...
Yeah. You know how to turn the live stream mic off for that, right?
Yes.
So you can turn it off and we'll turn it on.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to Mixspace. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have Professor Sayilgan here. He is currently an assistant professor at Georgetown, and he's going to be introducing us to his new book, Exploring Islam. I'm going to let Professor Sayilgan get into the book, the research, and everything in between. We're only just a few minutes behind, so thank you for bearing with us. And I think that's about it. We'll get started. Thanks, guys.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Amina and Make Space for hosting this event. I'm really honored and humbled to be here, to be with you. All right. So basically, every book has a story. So I will just go over the reasoning why I wrote this book, why there is a need, and some of just major receptions and preconceptions about Islam in America. All right. So this is you see the cover of the book. The top side, the Arabic phrase is "As-sabr miftahun al-fajr." So I thought if there is anything that really reflects the story of a book is this Arabic phrase. So which means literally that patience is the key for relief, for comfort, for salvation. So this is, and then the phrase at the bottom of the cover is "Ahlan wa sahlan ya marhaba." Again, I'm sure you are familiar with this phrase. So the idea is that basically, it's a journey, right? It's not. It takes time, and if not years, to write the book. So this is. I wanted to begin with this picture, and actually the introduction of the book starts with this story as well. So when I first came to DC, one of the major sites that I visited was the Library of Congress. So this is actually, the ceiling of the reading room of the Library of Congress, the main reading room from the Jefferson Building. So what's interesting, so on the ceiling of the room, actually, the building was opened in late 19th century. And then on the ceiling of the main room, they installed 12 morals, or the picture of 12 civilizations. And then they included Islam in late 19th century. And what's more interesting is that each civilization that they actually put on the ceiling of this reading room represents, basically the founding fathers. They acknowledged the contribution of each civilization to American society, to American culture, as well as the Western civilization in general. And the interesting thing, the reason they put Islam right on the ceiling is because of its contribution to physics. So again, a major branch of science, right? And now when you think of at least the way that Islam discussed in public, right, especially in the last 2 decades, there is so much, right? There is so much gap between this reception of Islam, right? That in late 19th century, that those who basically established the library like a major institution in DC, they were very comfortable to include Islam on the ceiling, right? But sadly, today there are questions, right? There are questions about the reception of Islam, and this is again a very positive image of Islam, right? If you think of the time, the context, late 19th century. So in my experience, again, I have been in the field for almost a decade, basically engaging with faith communities, secular communities, right? Teaching at the seminary, teaching at college, right? I currently teach undergrad courses at Georgetown University. So there are, again, in my experience, really there are a number of issues that we need to keep in mind when it comes to Islam in America, right? So one of them is there is a widespread religious illiteracy, right? It's not just about Islam, but about other religions. I mean, any non-Western religious tradition. But we see that this is more the case with Islam, right? There is more illiteracy with Islam. And I will go over the reasons why that the story of Islam is different when it comes to illiteracy, right? And there are certain preconceptions about Islam, right? That people, or even if they are not well informed about Islam, right? They are not trained about Islam. They know certain aspects of Islam, right? That Islam is associated with violence, right? That Islam is a misogynist tradition, right? That Islam is intolerant, that Islam is indifferent to religious pluralism. So we see that people, they come with some certain notions, even if they are not trained in Islam, right? They don't have degree, they are not educated. But when they come to the class, they are already, they know something about Islam, and mainly through media. The other thing is, again, one of the major reasons, you can hardly see really a major study book on Islamic theology in the field. So basically, both from non-Muslims and Muslim scholars. So one of the reasons is that there is the idea that Islam does not have a theology, right? That Islam is indifferent to major questions, right? Who is the creator, right? What is the purpose of life, right? How you should conduct your life. So there is this reception about Islam. And the other thing is that Islam is often more discussed in the context of politics, right? This area is understudied, right, to say the least. The other thing is Islamic spirituality, right? If you go to any Muslim country, like Muslim majority country, you see that some of the rituals of Islam are very visible, right? Just think of the 5 daily prayer, right? Think of fasting, and again, how can we think about Islamic rituals in public space now? Because the idea is that at least one of the overarching thesis of the book is really that Islam brings a different dynamic to public space because of its rituals, because of its practices. And the other thing is, especially in American context, yes, we should acknowledge that basically if there is, America hosts the most diverse Muslim community. So any Muslim, whether persecuted or isolated in their home country, they find a space in America. So you have this reality. But also there is the reality of the challenges of Muslims, right? That what kind of challenge they go through when it comes to practicing their religion. So I will go over some of the examples, give some specific examples. And the last point that at least that I wanted to point out as part of my experience, the problem of education, right? Then how Muslims, they learn about their religion in this country, right? Again, those of you are familiar with other religious tradition, we have the idea of seminaries, right? There are many seminaries, right? People who want to have a traditional understanding of religion, right? They go to seminaries, they are formed, they become priests, they become clergy, they become rabbi, right? And then now in the context of Muslims, there is a progress, right? But still there are lots of questions, right? And how Muslims in American context, they should form their own, right, people when it comes to leadership, when it comes to providing spirituality to, like, pastoral care to their fellow Muslims. There are questions about this. And when it comes to academic spaces, and again, still today, those who teach Islam in the academic institutions, many of them actually, they have their degree from Middle Eastern studies, right? So this is one thing. So the idea is that Islam, reducing Islam to the Middle East is a question. And the other thing is that many of them are non-Muslims, right? They are teaching, again, Islam. And I can say that there is lots of progress, and a good number of them, they teach Islam in a very positive way. At least this is the direction that we go in academic studies. But the question of Islamic education is still there, right? So there is progress, but not. But we have questions. Another question, and again, especially in the media or when it comes to discourse on Islam, usually we say that Islam is presented as a monolithic tradition. So basically, this is how Muslims, they think, this is how they practice, this is how they understand their religion. But again, especially in American context, there is so much diversity about Islam, right? There is, given that today, black Muslims, for example, they make more than 20% of Muslims in America, right? And many of them, they would link their Islam, their experience of Islam to, it dates to slavery, their experience of slavery, right? So we have indigenous movements, right? They emerge in American context, right? You have, for example, the Nation of Islam, right? That's very, very American. And then even within just immigrant Muslim community, so much diversity that you have basically America, the Muslim population in America replicates the global Muslim population, even the minority. Think of the Ahmadiyyas, right? Think of the Shiites, like think of even subgroups within Shiite tradition, right? So the idea is to acknowledge and to be mindful of this diversity. But sadly, when it comes to the presentation of Islam, this diversity is often dismissed, right? Even just if you look at this picture, right, it's difficult to put Muslims in one box, right? So another question is who are Muslims in America, right? If you look at just this is the map from a study from Pew Research. One question is that whether Islam is an American religion, right? Whether Islam is a mainstream tradition, right? Whether Islam is an American religion like any other tradition, like Christianity, right? Like Judaism. Although there is lots of progress to think of Islam as a Western religion, right? As a mainstream religion, but there are also those who really would like to counter this argument. For example, in this map, more than 40% of Muslims, they are born in America, right? What does it mean? That it is difficult to argue that Islam is a foreign religion, right? Because in most cases, we discuss Islam in the context of immigration, right? Muslims in the context of immigration. But Islam in this country is not the religion of immigrants, right? This is... and then I just mentioned, right, if you think of the indigenous movements, right, if you think of the Nation of Islam, right, and then it is difficult to argue that Islam is a foreign religion, that Islam is part of the society. And then now we have lots of studies. Again, Islam in America is still an emerging field, right, especially when we think of the number of slaves who came to America, right, their affiliation with Islam. At least we know that there is, again, the percentage ranges from 15 to 20%. Basically, those who were brought as slaves to America, they were Muslims. And then we now actually have studies indicating that that even in colonial time, right, we have in colonial documents we have Muslim names. So that means that the existence of Muslims, the presence of Islam and Muslims is not about, right, early 20th century immigrants. So that basically it dates to 16th century, right? It dates to slavery, right? When we discuss Islam, we need to discuss Islam in this context. That, let's say, even when Islam is discussed in the context of immigration, right, you see that it's often discussed in the context of the Middle East. And again, even when you look at the general Muslim population in America, that this is even not the case. Even again, if you look at the map, right, only around 14% of Muslims, they are affiliated, or they have, I mean, their country of origin will be Middle East and North Africa, right? So that means the overwhelming majority of Muslims, right, are not affiliated with the Middle East. And also over 40% of Muslims, they are born in America, right? And then Islam in America is not a new religion, and it's not a religion of immigrants, right? This is part of America. So the ideas, because then you can, when you discuss Islam in this context, then the direction of our discussion about Islam would be different, right? And then just to follow, to follow up the previous map, this is the global Muslim population. And again, the overwhelming majority of Muslims, they live what? They were in Asia Pacific, right? And today, Muslims, they make almost 1/4 of our global population. So the idea is that it's not a fair depiction of reception of Muslims to think of them as a Middle Eastern tradition, right? That this is, yes, Islam emerged in the Middle East, but it cannot be reduced to the Middle East in today's context. So this is at least how that global Muslim population is projected, right? Now according to the most recent study, it is today we have 1.8 billion Muslims. So in 2030, it's projected to be to make more than 25% of our global population. So it is increasing, as well as in America. If you look at the first 5 countries that has the largest Muslim population, none of them is a Middle Eastern country. So again, this another thing is that we need to reconsider our narrative, right? Our discourse about Islam in America. Another question, at least in my experience, that I see that often brought up, not just by non-Muslims, but also by Muslims, the dichotomy of Islam and the West, right? Or the West and the rest, right? So now, in today's context, it is extremely difficult really to make a case for this argument, at least in the Western context. So the idea is that the West is not about non-Muslims anymore, right? Because there are many examples that we can challenge. And sadly, this argument is used by Muslims too, right? Muslims and the kuffar and Muslims and the West, right? We are different. We have, but all with different civilization. Again, the idea of Judeo-Christian civilization or Muslims Islamic civilization. So this dichotomy in today's context doesn't work anymore. And then I just wanted to give some of the examples. Again, I think one of the best examples to counter these arguments was to think of that a major European metropolitan city has now a Muslim mayor, right? London has a Muslim mayor. Then, again, given that if there is any country that would be associated with kind of West civilization, of course it will be Britain, right? But now, again, London has a Muslim mayor. So how can we read it? Can we still discuss, right? Argue for these dichotomies, Islam and the West, right? Again, think of in America. I imagine no one would think of a Muslim, right, congresswoman wearing headscarf maybe, I don't know, a decade ago in America. Today we have, right? another Muslim, right? Andre Carson, another Muslim in the Congress, like for a while. And then I don't know if you follow the midterm elections recently. So for the first time, we have two Muslim mayors. One is in Dearborn, Michigan, and the other one is in Hamtramck, Michigan. For the first time, I think the Hamtramck has the city council is entirely Muslim, for example. So I knew, again, when you have this dynamics, right? Those who would like to promote Islamophobia, how can you argue, right, that now we can go for the dichotomies of, right, Islam and the West, and also for Muslims, right, whether here or overseas, arguing that, right, Islam and the West, right, that the West is the enemy. But when you say enemy, really, that you include Muslims, right, that there are the reality of Muslims, right, especially in American context. So it is now we can say that these arguments are outdated, right? Whether from a Muslim perspective or non-Muslim perspective, we now see a more integrated society, right? Especially in American context, right? So the idea is to think of Islam and the West as two separate poles or dichotomies will not work anymore, because we have many examples that we can't counter, right? We can't challenge these dichotomies. Another, I wanted to use Esmauddin's book cover, the idea that, again, that Islam is a political ideology. That, I mean, I see that really a very recurring theme, narrative in mainstream media, right? That Islam does not have theology. Islam is basically doesn't provide spirituality. It's a political ideology, right? That's why, especially if you follow the recent, one is Obama's, when Obama ran for presidency, as well as 2016 presidential candidates. This was actually one of the major, no one directly would say that Islam is a political ideology, but this idea was behind of their arguments, right? For example, so much concern about Obama being a president, right? Being a Muslim. I mean, I think there was significant numbers of people who would think that Obama was a Muslim. But the idea is that, and I don't know if you followed in the news that Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State who passed away recently, may he rest in peace, that he was the one actually who stood up, basically said, okay, I know that he's not a Muslim first, right? But what if he is a Muslim, right? What if he is a Muslim, and what is wrong for being a Muslim, right? Because there was a very dominant narrative that, okay, so if you convince people that Obama is a Muslim, then we can provide more arguments against him, right? Then we can convince people that he should not be a president. And actually, if you are a little bit familiar with the history of Islam in America, so you see a similar narrative during John Kennedy's candidacy, basically, because in 1960s. So one of the arguments against him that he's a Catholic, because remember that he was the first Catholic to become a president. And then the argument is that basically instead of listening, focusing, or being loyal to our Constitution, he would be loyal to the Pope, right? He will listen to the Pope, right? So again, you see, now today we have another Catholic president, and the good thing is no one is discussing, right? No one is having a concern about the Catholic president anymore, right? This issue is, right, solved. But what's interesting now, at least an internal conversation within Catholicism, basically Catholics, whether he's a good Catholic or not. So basically, it became their own issue, but it's not mainstream Americans' problem anymore, right? So now the discussion is whether, as a liberal president, whether he should take communion or not, right? Whether he should go to the mass, he should be allowed to take mass or not, right? This is the concern now. So you see the change. And I mean, can we project a similar change for Muslims as well? I don't know. We'll see how things will develop. But at least it's interesting how an issue, right, in the context of Catholicism, having a president, Catholic president was a major problem, question, how it changed, right? How our society progressed, and can we project a similar thing for Muslims or Islam as well, right? Because, again, this was during 2016, presidential candidates, interviews. And one of major candidates was Ben Carson. He's also a committed Christian believer. And at some point, he made headlines by saying that a Muslim should not be a president, right? His reasoning is that, I would say, similar arguments that's used against Kennedy in 1960, that he would not be able to detach himself from Sharia, from Islamic law, right? This was the argument, a Muslim, right? Potential Muslim. And I mean, this is not, again, I discuss some of the case studies in the book, but if you are not informed enough about what Islamic law is, then you can make this argument. But generally speaking, right, you cannot imagine, right, a Muslim who would give up every practice, because all of the practices are part of Islamic law, right? If you think of 5 daily prayer, if you think of fasting, right? These are discussed as part of Islamic law, and then how can you remove this, right? You see that how there is no any logic behind of this argument. So I mentioned in the beginning, at least in my experience, really like teaching, whether in the college or just with the faith communities, one of the most difficult thing, students, they come to the class, they already learned about Islam. In many cases, they already know what is Sharia, right? That Sharia is violence, like it's about violence. That they already know that how Islam is misogynist, right? So you have, in a way, you have a learned audience before you, right? I mean, your job basically in your education, right, in your teaching, to see if you can unlearn, right? So let alone to teach them from scratch. So you first need to unlearn what they have learned, right, through media. And it is extremely difficult, challenging, really, for those of us who are teaching, right, in America. It's a major question. And I remember a few cases, you go to a community, right, so and then you give a presentation about Islamic theology, right, who is God in Islam? And interesting, in the Q&A session, that question, you don't have a question about Islamic theology, and then it will be usually, okay, tell us something about Shiite and Sunnis, tell us about jihad, right? So you didn't, because people, this is what they have in their mind. Regardless of what you say about Islam, it's difficult. Or you talk about Islamic spirituality, right? The topic, the section is dedicated to Islamic spirituality, but in the end, the questions are not, and now you don't get any question about Islamic spirituality, because people are not, again, they have other things in their mind about Islam, right? And then the challenges of practicing Islam, basically so we have, right, again, when you think of a Christian or a Jew in America, let's say an observant Christian and observant Jew, right, there are certain understanding. Let's say for a Christian, usually if you go to a Sunday service, you are a practicing Christian. It doesn't mean that Christianity is about this, right? You do charity, right? You do some voluntary work, so you are observant. But in the case of Islam, how can we define an observant Muslim? It becomes more complicated, right? Let's say you are a Muslim working for the White House. And we had, right, during the Obama administration, we had Muslims who are working for the White House, and you are an observant Muslim, right? First, you need to do your 5 daily prayer, right? Let's say at least a few of them would be at the White House. Do you have a space for it? And then for the prayer you have washing rituals, right? Is there a designated space to do your washing rituals, right? I mean, imagine you do your washing ritual in a public restroom in the White House. I mean, it's like a bizarre scene, right? It is an unusual thing that you go, you put your feet into the sink, right? So the idea is that now we need to be more creative, and not just, I mean, the mainstream society needs to be more informed about these things so that they wouldn't be intimidated, right? Or maybe now I see that more institutions, they have designated space for Muslims to do their ablution, right? I know a few colleges, they do it, few airports, they do it. So the idea is that Islam brings a different dynamic, or just, the Friday prayer. So we know that, again, generally speaking, Muslims, they enjoy a great freedom in this country, right? They are accommodated because, religion is not generally a bizarre thing. But there are also challenges, right? If your major communal prayers on Friday, it might be challenging, right? If you don't have a space, right? If you don't have permission from your supervisor to go and establish your prayer, it might be a challenge. I mean, in this context, for example, one example was a few years ago, a number of Muslims, they wanted to do their sacrifice for the Eid al-Adha, right? And then many of them, they go to like a small town in Virginia, in West Virginia, and became an issue because now you have many people who have an Islamic dress, attire, and go to this small town. And people, if they are not informed, they might be intimidated really about what's going on, right? And then the question of really then how we need to talk about Islam. Really, what is the good way to talk about Islam? So this is the picture from St. John's Lafayette Square. So in March 2019, I was invited to give a talk. Usually the churches, they have like adult forums to educate, train their congregation. And so when I arrived at the church, I realized basically there was unusual security. So apparently, as you know, that it is a church across from the White House. So my forum was at 10, and then so I was informed by the reverend that president will come to the service too. So same time. So this was, again, the church was doing like a world's religions faith program. So and for this week, they dedicated their teaching to Islam, basically and given the rhetoric, like the discourse about Islam, so they dedicated the sermon as well as the forum to Islam. And then after my forum, I wanted to attend the service too. So basically, I was so curious to see how the reverends would address like an audience that includes the president and the first lady, he has been very controversial about his discourse on Islam, right? So I just wanted to sit in the service and see how he would engage with Islam. And one interesting thing that I thought that he would talk about Islamophobia, about how the president's immigration policy is wrong, right, Muslim ban. He didn't get into any of this. What he did is basically to talk about the 5 daily prayer. That how there are things that we can learn from Muslims. That Islam's this 5 daily prayer has an egalitarian nature, right? That everyone, regardless of his or her status, they can stand shoulder to shoulder and worship together. It was a very civilized service, right? I mean, this church is very liberal generally. I don't think that there would be a high percentage of people who would vote for the president. It was very civil and nice, but I was really impressed by the Reverend's remarks, the way that he engaged with Islam, right? This is one of a good example of how, right, one can talk about Islam. And last thing, I want to finish this with some of at least principles that are provided by Bishop Krister Stendhal and his concept of holy envy. So Bishop Stendhal, he served at Harvard Divinity School for many years, basically a very good academic, a Lutheran, but later on he was assigned to be a bishop, I think in Geneva. So in his context, when he went there, there was lots of controversy about Mormons. So Mormons, they wanted to establish a church or like a temple, sacred space, and there was so much resistance against, again, given that, right, Mormons, they have different theology, we don't need to go into it. And then eventually with his support, because of his support, they were able to establish the temple, Mormon temple. And then it was there that he provided some principles of interfaith engagement. Really, how can we engage with another faith? Whether you are Muslim or non-Muslim, I think it can be a good example, principles that we can take with us. So one of the first things is that the principle is, so this is his principles are discussed in the context of holy envy, right? So that we let people of, first let people of other religion define themselves, right? So when you want to learn about Hindu, right? I mean, of course, it makes sense if you learn from a Hindu, right? If you have a Hindu in your circle, why don't you go and ask for this Hindu, right? To have an accurate image of the tradition, right? If you want to learn about Judaism, why don't you go to learn from a rabbi, right? So this is his principle. And then if you want to learn about Islam, Muslims, don't take don't take the media or those who are working for Islamophobia, right? Those who are promoting Islamophobia, this shouldn't be your source, right? To learn about Islam. First principle. The second one, so usually we, again, the people, they compare, right? How this thing is more beautiful than theirs, right? So the idea is that don't compare the positive qualities of our religion with the negative qualities in other religions, right? So you should be fair in your comparisons, right? So we have this, and then why don't you, and they don't have this, right? Because again, we can make the same argument in Islam too, that there is, every tradition has something beautiful that we can learn from it, right? Then we can take from it, right? And then finally develop holy envy. So the idea is that try to see, something that you can appreciate from another tradition, right? You can learn, right? You can take it as an example, right? And this can be, right, a source of engagement and cooperation among religious traditions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your attention.